Okay, so we are going to start with the next process of our tiles, which is going to be to add the midground, the foreground, and figuring out how to cut out those pieces and add details and other things. Okay, so first off, what you'll need when you're getting ready to do this is you're going to need your reference sketches. These sketches and the reference photo will help guide you in the process. Plus, your photo is going to have a lot more detail probably than your sketch, and that's okay. So make sure you have your reference by you. Mine's going to be right next to me for when I get started. Now, we are going to begin by thinking about how we're going to build up our layers. So I'm going to work on my Arizona one, which is my circle. And what I did is I kind of traced out the rough shape of my next cutouts. Okay, so now I can either decide to cut out these shapes and keep reducing them as I go, or I can kind of use it as connect the dots point. So I'm going to move my base tile, because this is my base, that is my background. I'm going to move that out of the way. And I already have a slab pretty much rolled out. Now I want my second slab to be a little bit thinner than my first slab. So this was 1/4 inch thick. I want this to be even thinner than that, probably 1/8 of an inch thick. Because when I build up my tile, I don't want it to be super thick. I don't want it to look bulky in any of the areas. So I'm gonna give this one more roll. And I'm not using thickness strips because it is gonna get pretty thin. You're just gonna wanna make sure it is even across the board. All right, and I'm gonna flip it once. And this is just about a handful of clay. It's not a lot of clay. It looks like a lot because it's expanding as we're rolling it out. So about a handful, and we're not going to use all this. Okay. So this looks pretty good. And once again, I'm going to compress my slab. Always compress your slabs. It makes them smooth. It makes them stronger. You gotta do both sides of the slab. And we're flipping. So compressing. All right. Okay. So I have my template. If you don't have your template, that's okay. Just draw a circle again or whatever your shape is, and then just lightly draw your image. So what I'm gonna do, I got a few air bubbles in here, so I'm gonna pop those real quick because we don't want that in our final image. There we go, looks better. Okay. So I can either cut this out or I can kind of make it like a connect the dots. So I'm gonna just lay this on here, and then I'm going to use oh goodness. I think that first one I had was good. I'm gonna use something with a sharp tip, and I am going to poke around the outside of it. To get my next layer. And I'll show you what this looks like in a minute. Now I did it like this in case maybe you mess up and then you need to reuse your template. Feel free to cut out your shape, that is fine as well. Okay, so I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but I just trace the top of it, and now I have to do the outside of my circle. Now with the outside of my circle, I can just take my tool and I can trace around my template. Now circles are kind of hard, so it's okay if it's not the same exact. Okay, so that should work. So if I was to lift this up, I'm just cutting out. And if your slab is too big, like you have extra, that's fine. We can use that for the other layers. Okay, so I'm just gonna set that to the side. So as you can see, I have a dotted line. See my dotted line? So that's gonna be my next layer. Okay, it's my next layer. So I'm gonna cut this out now. And I'm actually going to use my X-Acto knife because I'll get a cleaner cut. You guys can use the sharp edge of your tool that the school provided. So now I have that next shape, which it's actually going to go like this on it. So now that I have my next shape, I can line it up with my tile to be like, okay, cool, I see it coming together. That doesn't look too bad. And now I need to score and slip this onto my background. Okay, so I'm just gonna make a few kind of guidelines so I know where this is gonna go. So I have a few guidelines there. I should probably do the top as well. So I just know where I'm going to put my scoring. Okay. So there you can see I kind of made some guidelines. That way I know where to score, and I'm gonna score everywhere the clay is going to touch. So, where's my spot? There it is. And I'm gonna go in one direction. I'm gonna just go down as I'm scoring. And I really wanna make sure this is going to stick. So I scored the background of my tile. As you can see, since my background is leather hard, I didn't get a lot of clay boogers. That's what we want, okay? That's what we want. We don't want it to be super sticky. We want it to be leather hard. And now I'm gonna score the back of this. My other piece, my second layer. And I want to make sure I'm doing it in the same direction as I did on my background, straight up and down. That way it attaches nicely. Okay. So I have my two pieces right here. I'm going to get my slip. You might need to rehydrate your slip because it's been a while since we've done ceramics, probably. So I'm going to make sure I cover this. Gonna mix my slip a little bit with my slip. That should be good in that area. And you want to make sure you cover the whole thing with slip, a thin layer. I have some chunky bits in mine. And you want it to be able to lay flat. Okay, I'm gonna put a few more scratch marks in this one just so it's really secure. All right, so I have all my slip on my base. And now I'm gonna flip it over and I'm gonna attach it. And I'm gonna try and line it up with those lines. I'm gonna apply a little bit of pressure. Now we have to remember we score, we slip, and then we weld. So I'm gonna have to grab another one of my tools. And I'm going to need to make sure I blend both pieces together. So I'm just gonna go around the edge and blend that. So it doesn't fall off. Now you have to do all the way around. If you have some clay that's hanging off the edge, maybe right here, you can just trim it, that's fine, but blend it first. Blend it together first, weld it together, and then see if you need to trim it, okay? And doing nature tiles is very forgiving since clay is natural and organic. Doing anything with nature and clay, even if you feel like you messed up, it can still look good. It can still look nice and neat. You can see that my bottom's all bumpy and rigidy and stuff, but it's nature, so it might be a little bit okay, and I can always go back and smooth it out with my sponge. And I can always trim it in a later process. So I would blend the inside of my piece as well, and I'm actually going to smooth it out just to make sure there's no rough spots, there's no clay boogers. Ladies, be careful if you have nails and they're super long. You can gouge out the clay while you're doing anything. But then as you can see, it's starting to take shape. It's starting to take form, okay? All right. It's okay if you don't have all the tools. Your one tool that we gave you should be okay. You can use a toothpick to score. You can use anything that's really scratchy. Toothpick usually works. A bunch of toothpicks put together usually works. Okay, so now that I did that, I have 2 more to do, and I'm gonna build those up first before I start doing any other details, because I want it to get leather hard. I just put a fresh piece of clay on, so I'm gonna want to let that set before I do any carving, any details into it, okay? So I'm gonna take my template again, and I had all this awesome extra clay that I already rolled out. And I'm gonna roll out, I'm gonna try and make it a little bit thinner. So I'm gonna have to put a little bit more pressure. on this to roll it out because, like I said, I don't want my tile to feel bulky. So each layer should get a little bit thinner and thinner as we go. Okay, so I'm rolling this out. I probably won't use this piece. Okay. And for a rolling pin, you can just use something that has a flat edge, or maybe you got a wine bottle, or maybe you got a bottle of some sort. Maybe you went and you got a rolling pin. Okay, so this looks pretty thin, looks pretty good. And I'm going to repeat the process with my next layer. So that's why I have my reference. I can look at the notes that I made. So my next layer is going to be this part. Okay. So I'm just gonna lay my template on. I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna poke the holes so I can trace it. I like poking the holes too. I like the sound of the paper punching through it. Sounds nice. You can use a toothpick for this as well. Okay. And I'm gonna cut out the bottom again because this is one piece. So like I said, you can use the bottom of your tool that we gave you for this. Okay, and this is a thinner layer, and you can see where the dotted line is. That is going to be my next mid-ground. I believe that's my last mid-ground. Oh, did I not cut this out right? No, I did. Okay. And look, I have enough clay. So your layers are gonna kind of get smaller and smaller and smaller as we go, which is nice because if we roll out one big slab, we can keep using that. So I'm gonna take my X-Acto knife again, and I'm gonna cut around. I got clay scraps. Bring this back over, and and it's not matching exactly, but that is okay. I think it will forgive me if I don't match it perfectly. So don't panic. Be like, hey, that looks good. I have my background, I got my back mid-ground, and I got my front mid-ground. I only have one more mid-ground or foreground to go. But this looks pretty good, and I'm gonna be able to work with my mistake, my whoopsie-daisy. I actually think this goes up here. Yeah, it goes up here. But I kind of liked it like that. So you can play with the design a little bit of your stuff. Don't feel like you are stuck in one area of anything, okay? So I'm gonna tilt this just a little bit down. And I need a score and slip, but I just wanna show you. So we can kind of see the scene coming together, correct? Yeah? You guys are like, oh, it's making sense now, Miss Sergeant. I can do this. Yes, you can. So I'm gonna repeat the same process. I'm gonna score, I'm gonna slip, and then I'm gonna weld. If you have questions, ask in the chat. I can answer as I do this real quick. So we are creating whatever our nature sketches were. You're picking one image, one of your sketches, and you are recreating that with clay. And it's okay if it's not perfect. I went a little bit too far. That's okay. We'll go right there and it'll still be okay. You are only making one tile. You're not making two. So pick your favorite. And we started already. So if you feel like something's too hard, that's okay. You can go to your other sketch and you can try working on your other tile instead. That's why we did two. Sometimes we need options. Okay, I got my slip on there and I'm going to shift this over. Now remember, scoring, we're creating like that Velcro, that mesh. It's getting the glue into there. Okay. Now that I scored and I slipped, I gotta weld again. So I'm gonna weld the outside first. I'm gonna pull some of that clay up that's at the bottom. Okay, I still need to weld the inside, but you can start to see the layers. You see the bottom, you see the background, you see the back midground, and now you see the front midground. So you can see those layers, they look like little steps going up. So you can see how we're building on, and you can see that it gets really thick. That's why we're rolling out thinner pieces of clay for our additional layers, okay? You can do this with fresh clay, adding on these extra layers for your midground and foreground. Do it with fresh clay. We're just gonna wait for it to get leather hard before we carve and add any other details or carvings, because we want our carvings to look nice and not have a lot of clay boogers. But no, your skinny slabs, your slabs for your midground and foreground do not need to be leather hard. We just wanted the base so it wasn't wobbly and so it wasn't losing its shape. And if it's really hard to get in some areas and you have a paintbrush, you can use a paintbrush to get into those cracks, to weld it. And it also looks extremely nice when you do this. So, and you can dip it in water if you need some more moisture. And I'm going back around my main form. All right, so this is what I have so far. I have one more area to do, and that is my foreground. Now with my foreground, if I look at my reference photo, I can either, it's very rocky here. I can either decide to cut out that shape like I did with the first and second one, Or since it's so rocky, I can decide if I want to build up those rocks and attach those rocks. Okay, we can see that it's very broken here. It's very rigid. It looks kind of like dinosaur skin. I don't know what dinosaur skin actually looks like, but that's what it reminds me of. So I get to choose if I want to do my cutout and then carve it, or if I want to build onto it. So I'm just gonna put this aside because I think we pretty much have the idea of how to do our layers. Do we have any questions about doing the layers? Okay, I think we're good. Now, since my tile's not very big, when I do, say, like trees, or when I do rocks or water, water is very smooth. So what you could do for water, I'm gonna use my big piece of clay right here. So what you can do for water is, if you see the ridges or if you see ripples, you can roll out a very small coil. The smaller the better, because these are small images. So you can roll out a coil. Now we're focusing a lot on textures. Now you can use any tools you need to create the textures that you want. I always recommend practicing in a slab first. Okay, you guys have plenty of time to work on these, so there's really no rush. Play and experiment. I'm using a paintbrush. Who knew you would use a paintbrush in ceramics? So I'm gonna score this on here. And oop, I just need a little bit of slip. I don't need that much. Okay. So I scored this on here. Now if I was making a little ripple of water, I can just use my fingers to blend. I don't need to, because it's very organic, I don't need to do much. I can use my paintbrush to smooth out and weld. If you don't have a paintbrush, maybe a makeup brush that you don't care about. So this is a little bit big if you're gonna do like a water ripple or something, but you really want to make sure water is smooth. So you can see I added that, and just imagine like different lines flowing through to do that. So if you're doing a waterfall scene, that would be great to use, a great idea to use. Rocks, clay comes from rocks, so it's really easy. You're just gonna want to make sure your rocks are proportional. So it's okay if it doesn't match exactly, but we might need to use smaller rocks. But I'm just gonna attach them on here. Of course, always score and slip. So I'm just making different shapes. I'm not really concerned about how perfect it is. I'm just concerned that it looks like rocks. Now let's do a bigger rock. Do a bigger rock. And then if I want them to look like smooth, nice rocks, or I don't want to see my fingerprints, I'm just taking my paintbrush again and smoothing it out. So I have some rocks. You guys can see, they look like rocks, right? Yeah, they look bumpy. Okay, so lots of practicing with texture. You can also take a stone and roll a stone through it if you're trying to get like a sandy or a grainy look. Your sponge is not going to do much for texture. Trees. So a lot of us have trees in our pictures. Do not get, this is not what I want. I do not want this. Here, I'm going to draw it in another piece of slab. Do not do this. No, no, don't do this. Don't do the little tree. Okay, do not do Christmas trees. Okay, you're gonna ruin everything that you do. Look, I'm ripping it up. I'm upset. I'm upset. Don't do a Christmas tree. Don't do a tree like that. An easy way to do trees, and I'm gonna do a big tree. Draw a line. Draw a line. Start from the top and do very little short lines. Okay, so that's my first half. You can see my tree. Okay. Now you can also do the same idea to build up your tree. Maybe you have a tree that's in the foreground. Yeah? So you can take little pieces of clay and build it up as well. Now in my Yosemite one, I have my Yosemite Mountain. Pretend that's Half Dome. Doesn't look like Half Dome. And I have a lot of trees along the inside of it. Now, I'm not gonna do little cookie cutter trees or big trees. I'm probably just gonna do little lines, and textures to make it look like they're trees far off in the distance. Okay, so if you have trees in the foreground or in the midground, look and see what they actually look like. They're gonna probably look a bit like this. Okay, see how I did trees? Because it's far off in the distance. We don't have a close-up look. So trees like this in the foreground, trees like this if they're very far back and away from everything. Okay. Sky or clouds, don't stress too much about those yet. An easy way, you're not going to be doing cutouts of those. More than likely when we get to painting, we're gonna worry more about that. For clouds though, okay, I got water, I got rocks, I got trees. For sky and clouds, so okay, so this is my horizon line. Okay, this top part's gonna be the sky. So what you can do is you can take a round edge. So my tool right here has a round edge. You can see. And you can kind of make small indents into your background. And clouds are very organic. So don't do fluffy cartoon cloud. It's not what we do. And you can push the clay around very gently. You don't need to go deep. You just can get the idea. It's kind of hard to see. Okay, it's kind of hard to see, but it is a light impression. It looks better in the recording I just did. Can you see it? Okay, so just very lightly with the clouds. You are not building up clouds. Don't build up clouds, okay? Is there anything else anyone wants me to demo, like detail-wise, that you might have in your reference photo? You can type it in the chat if you need to. How do you do leaves? So leaves, I think you're doing a succulent. Leaves would be cutouts. So easy way to do leaves is you can make a template of the leaves just like I did with this. And I'm gonna freehand mine because I'm cool. And so I can cut out each leaf. You can make a template, that way each leaf is uniform if you need it to be. Or you can even go outside and get a real leaf. It's up to you. Now, I want to smooth out and I want to make the leaf look real, especially if I'm doing like a succulent or something that's really close up. You're going to want to make it look real. You're going to want to make it look dimensional. So I cut this out. I'm smoothing out the sides. I can smooth down here. This is the same if you're doing a petal. You want to get the shape of the petal right. And you can see I'm smoothing out the edges. I dented it in a little bit so it has a little bit of a curve to it. A little bit of a curve. And you would do the same thing for flower petals. And then once this leather dry, you can add some details into it. So maybe it's really smooth. Don't do that. Don't do that with your leaves, okay? These are cartoon leaves. It's better to just possibly leave it alone. A river running through the middle. I'm gonna have to see your example and I will help you with that. If anything is in perspective, you need to cut it down into those layers again. So I will help you out a little bit with that. Okay. Any other questions?